Hi, welcome back to another episode of Kickin Asperger's. I'm your host, Tim. This is going to be episode number 2, and I'm going to talk to you about some of the diagnoses, or rather misdiagnoses, that I faced prior to being properly diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when I was a teenager in high school. First, I want to make it clear that I am not a medical professional. I do have no formal medical training whatsoever. Everything that is in this video is completely my opinion. There's no medical fact behind it. It's just things that I have come to realize throughout my life as someone who has lived with Asperger's and works out in the real world. So, as I mentioned in episode number 1, the last episode, there are a lot of people that prior to being diagnosed with Asperger's, they tend to be misdiagnosed with a lot of other things. That was my case. I was diagnosed with what I like to call, the alphabet soup. I was misdiagnosed with ADD, ADHD, the obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, oppositional defiance disorder, ODD, bipolar, even just, run-of-the-mill depression, if you will. And really, some of those diagnoses, they make sense, but Asperger's makes better sense when you truly understand what Asperger's is. First off, people that have Asperger's, or at least in my case, when I have Asperger's, I tend to be ultra focused into certain things. Recently, I have set a goal to lose 30 pounds by the end of the year, which gives me a little bit over 2 months left to lose a total of 30 pounds. And one of the ways that I have decided to help me achieve that goal is by doing some moderate exercise of walking. And for those people that actually know me, they have seen my posts in social media where I am out walking, and I am really dedicated to walking. It's almost like I have become ultra focused on my walking. I'm making sure that I am getting 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, even sometimes as much as 22,000 steps in a single day. Again, that's kind of the ultra focus that I have as someone that has Asperger's tends to deal with. Which that ultra focus is really funny because one of the things that people tend to be misdiagnosed with is ADD, attention deficit disorder, or ADHD. And it's really funny because for a group of people with Asperger's that become ultra focused, how is it that they can also have attention deficit disorder? Well, really, it's when you look at your, your superiors, whether that be your parent or a counselor or psychologist, psychiatrist, medical physician, pediatric physician, your boss, your teacher, counselor, whoever it may be. They want you to focus on a certain thing, and you don't. So obviously, the default is well, you've got ADD. You're not focusing on what we want you to focus on. It's not that someone that has Asperger's, and I think this is true of the general population of people that have Asperger's that we face. It's we completely have the capability of focusing on something. It's just that we need to have the interest in focusing on it. And there are a lot of subjects in school I had no interest in whatsoever. I am not an English person. I do not understand a lot of the books that you're given, and some of the hidden meanings behind some of the stuff that's in those books. That does not interest me. So, of course, my attention is not going to be based on those books. I have no interest in that subject, or very little interest in that subject. I would much rather focus on something that I have interest in. So I think it's kind of funny that, people with Asperger's, or a lot of people that have Asperger's, are misdiagnosed with ADD. Again, it's not that we can't focus on something or that we can't pay attention to something. And, oh, look, we got a cameo from Roach. A little tail. Hi, Roach! But some of the other things that another one of the things is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. I know a lot of times growing up, I would sit there and tie my shoes and retie my shoes and retie them again and time again and time again. And it seems a bit obsessive. And what it is I wanted to make sure that the two loops were the same length on both sides, that the two, laces that weren't the loops, they were the same length, that none of my shoelaces were drooping over my shoe to where they would get wet in a puddle, that they were underneath my shoe, that the little plastic piece that was on the lace would get up underneath the shoe and that would fall apart. You know, it's I it does seem like it's a bit obsessive. So being diagnosed with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, makes a little bit of sense. Same thing with what I mentioned last week when I said when I go to a Chinese restaurant, the buffet, and I get 10 pieces of sweet and sour chicken. I count out 10 pieces of sweet and sour chicken. For a lot of people, that's a little strange. But quite honestly, I want you to know if you have Asperger's, I want you to know that that's not as strange as you would like to think. There are a lot of people out there that have little oddities like that. For instance, their thermostat, it has to be set on an even number. It has to be 68 degrees or 70 degrees. It can't be 69 or 71 or 67. It has to be an even number. Same thing with, with the volume that people have in their car. It has to be set on an even number or a multiple of 5. And I have talked to other people that go to Chinese restaurants and they prefer getting, their sweet and sour chicken or their sweet and sour pork. They get it in quantities of 5. 5 is just a nice round normal for a bunch of people, and there's a sense of calmness and satisfaction with it. So again, if you have Asperger's and you have something that's a little bit strange like that, and family members or teachers or classmates or whoever give you a hard time about that, please know it's really not all that strange. You That's not an obsessive trait. It's a little quirk, and we all have quirks. So I want you to know that that's don't be afraid to have that quirk, because we all have them. But going back to making sure that my shoes were tied properly. It's not that it was obsessive. It's that people, it was a sense of order. And I found that having Asperger's, that most people that happen to have Asperger's tend to want a sense of order. That is, having a set schedule to where everything is, laid out for you, that you get up at this time and then you shower and you leave for work at this time, or you go to class at this time, or you dedicate this time for your homework, and this is when you're going to eat lunch, this is when you're going to eat dinner. You have set order, and for me, having shoelaces that way was a certain order. Is the same thing with wearing some of my clothing. When I had t-shirts growing up, it had to have patterns printed in certain areas. I couldn't have like a pattern over the entire front of my shirt. That seems like a little bit odd, a little bit of an obsessive trait, hence the obsessive compulsive disorder. But it was just the order that I felt. I didn't like the texture of the clothing, where it was printed like that, stuff like that. The other thing is another misdiagnosis, really, that I was misdiagnosed with, was oppositional defiance disorder, ODD. And really, it's not that I was being defiant. What happened was, or what would happen is, there were times where things would change. The schedule would change, the plan would change. We'd say we were going to go to the park. We didn't go to the park. We ended up going to the grocery store instead. Or things were delayed. And my response was, I would usually get frustrated. I'd start to raise my voice. I wouldn't necessarily yell, but I would raise my voice. I would get louder. And, it really sounded like I was fighting the authoritative figure, whether that be my parents, my mother, my father, whether it be my teacher or something like that. And really, it was disruption in the order of my day. I had a schedule. People with Asperger's tend to have, they tend to be very organized and appreciate schedules. And when you disrupt that schedule, it kind of disrupts them. It makes them feel uneasy, or at least it makes me feel uneasy, and that's how I would respond. It was misdiagnosed as having ODD. That's not the case. I do not defy authoritative figures at all. I respect the police. I respect business owners, and I've respected my principals. Even today, I have a great relationship with an assistant principal of my junior high middle school. At the time they were called junior highs, my 7th, 8th, and ninth grade assistant principal. I still have a fantastic relationship with him today. Um, so it's not that I defy authoritative figures. I have a really good relationship with my parents. I eat dinner with them on multiple occasions throughout the week, or have lunch with them and talk to them on a regular basis. Um, so again, it's just the opposition wasn't there. The defiance wasn't to the authority figure. The defiance was to the change in schedule. You have upset the plan, the schedule for that day. Then there's, being bipolar or really depressed. People that have, or at least for me, I shouldn't say people. For me, I do get depressed from time to time having Asperger's. And really what it is it goes back to that wanting a sense of order and wanting uh, really just order and being right. That would mean I would get depressed when I would study hard for a test and I would not get the score that I expected. And most cases, that was 100%. Um, I didn't get that score. And that would cause me to become a little bit depressed because I worked hard and I did not achieve the goal that I was wanting. I think that's fairly common for people that don't have depression or don't really have any sort of psychological disorders at all. Um, People want to meet their goals. It's just that for me, again, it goes back to that having a sense of order. My goal was 100%. So, when things don't go as planned, I get a little bit depressed. And I can understand why someone who has Asperger's would be misdiagnosed or diagnosed with depression. And really, all of these things throughout my preteen years as a child, my preteen years, my adolescent years, prior to me being diagnosed, pardon me, with Asperger's, is that I was given prescriptions from psychologists, or I'm not psychologists, but psychiatrists, such as Paxil and Prozac, to help counter the effects of the ADD and the OCD and the ODD and the depression and stuff like that. And, here it is, a couple decades later, plus some, since I've taken those medications. And, if they worked, I would probably still be on them today. But the truth is that since those are really misdiagnoses, and it wasn't until I was in high school that I received the diagnosis, which I consider to be proper, of having Asperger's from a psychiatrist. Those medications to me didn't seem to work. I don't think my parents really saw that they were working. I don't think that my teachers saw that they were benefiting me in any way. Because again, those diagnoses, in my opinion, do not fit who I am. I think the Asperger's fits who I am. And after being diagnosed with Asperger's when I was in high school, both my mother and I, we sat down, we did a lot of reading about Asperger's, and honestly, it wasn't something that was a very common diagnosis. Not a whole lot of people understood it or knew about it when it came to the medical profession or the psychiatric and psychological professions. And therefore, it was easy. If you don't know about something, if you don't know that is a particular condition, you cannot diagnose it. So I think that's why I had all those misdiagnoses, and it was much later that I was diagnosed with Asperger's, and that made sense. And when you sit there and you read about people that have Asperger's, they are commonly misdiagnosed with the ADD, ADHD, OCD, ODD, bipolar depression, all, the alphabet soup of various psychological, psychiatric conditions. So it took a little while. It took some misdiagnoses and some trial and error before I finally got to the what I consider to be the proper diagnosis of having Asperger's, and educating myself has allowed me to understand who it is and what I'm dealing with. And I really think that if you have Asperger's, or if you think you have Asperger's, that you should invest the time in understanding what it is and trying to figure out how you can beat it. You are someone, if you truly do have Asperger's, I think you are someone who is going to be super focused. If you have an interest in it, you will be super focused in trying to figure out how to combat and overcome certain deficiencies that people with Asperger's tend to have, and will tend to push yourself in life to create uh, or excel in your activities, your daily activities. Um, Again, that's if you have the diagnoses of Asperger's. I am not someone who can diagnose that for you. I strongly suggest that you talk to a psychologist, psychiatrist, medical professional who has the proper training and the proper background in properly diagnosing you and whatever condition you may have. And it may turn out that you don't have Asperger's. You may have one of those other diagnoses. But yeah, so I, again, take the time to understand that, and I think it will make a lot more sense if you have Asperger's, how most people that have it are at work, and you can find studies about what they've done to overcome, and um, essentially find treatments that work for them. And no one treatment, I don't think, with Asperger's is going to fit everyone. It took me a long time of a lot of trial and error to overcome some of the difficulties that I have with Asperger's. If you happen to be the coworker or a sibling of someone who has Asperger's, or you're a parent or a teacher of a child that has Asperger's, or even if you're a boss, I strongly encourage you also to take time to read up a little bit and go to like the Autism Speaks website and look up a little bit about Asperger's and some of the different things, as well as stay tuned to this channel because I want to go over some of the things. I'm going to go over some of the things about Asperger's and what it's like to live with, and how it is interacting with other people, and how other people perceive, or at least they've perceived me, real true stories that have happened to me, so that hopefully I can provide a benefit to you if you have Asperger's on how you can react to certain situations, or how to better prepare yourself for these situations. If you know someone who has Asperger's, how you can approach them and be sensitive, understanding. I don't think that sensitive is really the proper word, but maybe understanding on what difficulties they challenge, or they are facing, they're challenged with every day, having Asperger's. With that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude this episode of Kickin Asperger's. I hope that you tune in next week for the next episode, where I'm going to talk about some famous people, some celebrities that have Asperger's, and how I actually think Asperger's, or that diagnosis, has helped them excel in their chosen career path. I hope everyone has a great evening. Again, thank you for tuning into this episode of Kickin Asperger's, and I look forward to having more conversation with you. If you would, please subscribe to this channel so you can be notified when a new video is posted. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them down below, and I will be happy to answer those questions in the way that I can. So again, thank you very much for tuning in, and I look forward to this journey of learning about Asperger's together. Y'all have a great night.